Okay, thank you all for being here. I know Friday evening is sort of a tough time, so I really appreciate you all taking the time to come out and celebrate the start of the Igniting Innovation Summit, which is all day tomorrow. My name's Kara Kubarich, and I am the chair of the event. I'm a junior here at Harvard, and I'm so excited to celebrate the second year of the summit. Last year it was quite a grassroots event, and our founder came out from Seattle, so she's going to be here tomorrow to partake in what is sure to be a really, really amazing, inspirational, exciting day of innovation and discussion and connection. So tonight, to sort of kick things off in a bit more of an intimate setting, we have invited a few wonderful speakers and David Gergen here to moderate our panel. And the theme of the discussion is media and technology and social innovation. So today we are so connected, we are so enmeshed in technology, and we only thought it was appropriate and relevant to try to explore this theme and how this relates to social impact and social change. So the four social entrepreneurs up here today are amazing and outstanding examples of people using technology to create incredible impact and to change lives around the world. So Ryan's going to introduce them, and Paolo will speak a bit more about our moderator, who we are so honored to have here tonight. But with that, I just want to thank you all for being here. I'm very excited for tomorrow, so I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. And thank you again to our panelists for being here. So here's Ryan.
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Heffron and I'm the Vice Chair of this year's Summit. To echo what Kara said, we're just so excited to have you all here and to have this opening night event to kick off a great weekend. So without further ado, I'd like to just run through what's going to be going on tonight. First, we'll be having a panel with our four wonderful panelists and David Gergen. Following that, we will have a film screening of a film that one of our panelists, Deborah Zimmerman's organization, Women Make Movies, produced. And we're fortunate enough to have the filmmaker, Joanna Liver, here this evening as well. Following that, there will be a dessert reception in the senior common room right back there. And we'd love for you guys to join us for that as well. So our panelists this evening, from left to right, are Charles Tsai, who's founder of Social Creatives, Deborah Zimmerman, who is the executive director of Women Make Movies, Nicholas Negroponte, founder of One Laptop per Child and the former director of the MIT Media Lab, and Kara Euler, who is the founder of the Meta Lab at Harvard and co-creator of Ziga, and David Gergen, who is our moderator, who Paolo will talk a little bit more about.
Thank you, Kara and Ryan, distinguished speakers, and our moderator, David Gergen, for joining us tonight. Over the past few months, we have worked really hard to put on this panel event tonight and our conference tomorrow, and we are extremely fortunate to have David Gergen moderate for us tonight. David Gergen is the director for the Center of Public Leadership at Harvard, and he is a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. He is a senior political analyst for CNN and has worked as an advisor for 4 presidents of the United States. He has published a best-selling book on leadership and has been extremely supportive of the Social Innovation Collaborative. Tonight, Professor Gergen will share a few words with you on how people with determined passion can shape institutions, break down barriers, and change the world through social innovation. We are excited to have him with us today. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, and one of the great joys of being at Harvard is to feel the vitality of the undergraduates, especially undergraduates who are as talented and caring as you all are in organizing this. We thank you for doing that. I'm going to be fairly brief because the real stars of the show are the panelists. I did want to offer a couple of thoughts. I just came with my young assistant, Mike Zuckerman, who's here, just graduated from Harvard a few months ago, Magna, and has become not my right arm, but my left brain very quickly. We just came from an event over at Loeb House welcoming military veterans to Harvard. There are over 250 now on this campus. And what I find is that Drew Faust, as leader of this university, has really helped to spark a growing commitment across the university towards service, toward public service, and service in many forms, so that we now have ROTC coming back, we now have veterans who are welcomed back. But we also have the social entrepreneurs and others who are working in civilian capacities. And my hope is that over time that you all can form alliances for change. Because what you're going to find among many of the military veterans, this was the university not many years ago looked down on military veterans and sort of was hostile to them. You didn't admit you were in military service if you were here on the faculty. It's changed. And what you'll find is a lot of these military veterans share your aspirations to build a better America. I mean, after all, they went and put their lives on the line. So we're inviting a young man named Eric Greitens to the campus who's coming here soon. Eric went to Duke. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He got a PhD in economic development. He went and traveled to war-ravaged countries like Rwanda and others, and then he signed up for the Navy SEALs. And he had 4 tours. He's come back. He had a lot of his troops were very badly wounded, and he's now started an organization called The Mission Continues. And it's for wounded, disabled veterans to find jobs doing things for social change here in the country, in the United States. Because they signed up to serve their country, they mustered out because they were wounded, but now they can come back and find things. And I would argue that people like that are your allies in social change. They are people that you can leverage and gain make a bigger difference if they find you and you find them. Because it's been apparent for some time that the leadership for social change came out of the social entrepreneurship community. I must tell you, I didn't know much about this. I learned about you all through my 2 children. And my daughter-in-law, Teach for America, worked in the Casey Foundation, got me very energized, and now I'm a board member for Teach for America. And I learned about what was going on, and I joined the board for City here, and I've gotten involved with a number of the other organizations. But it was through my children, and now I have come to believe that the social entrepreneurship movement is the best thing we've had going, the most important movement we've had in this country since the Civil Rights Movement. And you all, or many of you, are the pioneers that are making a real difference. And it's going back to Drew Faust. 3 years ago at Harvard, 9% of the senior class applied for Teach for America, 9%. Last spring, 18% applied for Teach for America. 1 out of every 5 Harvard seniors applied for Teach for America. There's a real transformation going on this campus around the notion of service. And this organization, you folks organizing this, the rest of you, have, I think, in alliance with others like unexpected partners like the military veterans, I think have the opportunity and frankly represent the best chance this country has to transform ourselves, because it's not coming out of our politics in Washington right now, right? We all see that. That's not an argument. The argument is, where does change then come from? And in my judgment, your generation represents the best hope for a lot of that. So we're honored tonight to have 4 people who have been out in front helping to cut this path open. So that a lot of us can learn from, and where better is the edge than in the media and social media and technology and social change. Where there's no other frontier that's more exciting and more interesting right now. So I congratulate you on the speakers, and like you, I'd like to cut to the chase. Let's get to the speakers and hear what they have to say. And if we could, I think it would be helpful for each of you to tell us a little bit about you, your organization. What you've learned. What are the 2 or 3 things you've learned? I'd like to know the positive lessons you've learned as being a social change agent, but what are the negative lessons? Where are the failures? What did you learn from that people need to avoid as well? And so this is all about what newness, but we start with an old rule of etiquette. Let's start with a woman. Kara.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do,
This is Karen Oler? That's
Yep,
the way you pronounce
that's
it?
right.
All right.
So my 2 organizations, actually 3 that I'm going to talk about today. I'm also a co-founder of the Meta Lab here at Harvard, which is a new lab out of the Berkman Center for Innovation in the Arts, Media, and Humanities. And through the Meta Lab, we're demoing out and creating a lot of our software called Ziga. And to even explain what Ziga is, I want to take one step. Well, Ziga is a platform for creating interactive documentaries. And to really explain it, since I have a few minutes, I'm going to tell you about a project I worked on 2 years ago that really led us into thinking about creating Ziga. So my background's in public radio. I've worked for many NPR shows for the last 12 years. And 2 years ago, it was the time of the election. And we were hearing a lot of rhetoric about Main Street versus Wall Street. And I started with 2 other people to make a project called Mapping Main Street. And the idea was that we'd have broadcast stories about specific main streets in the US that might try and subvert that rhetoric a bit. A Main Street in Chattanooga that was a prostitution strip, a Main Street in Arizona that is a border crossing, goes right through the border. And so we had the stories that went on Weekend Edition Saturday, but we also wanted to build a way for people to also help to document main streets near them. It turns out there are 10,466 of them, which we found out after we went through census data. And so we made it possible for anyone to contribute to the project by putting photos on Flickr and tagging them with their city and state, and then mapping Main Street, or on YouTube and video using the same convention. And the real challenge here was that, my background is in broadcasting. I've worked on interactive projects, and I had a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to do this, but ultimately to pull it off, I put all my stuff in storage and drove my car around the US for 15,000 miles with my collaborators and needed to pay, Flash developers and designers and lots of people to pull it off. And, we thought that if there was some platform where you could make and conceive of a project like Mapping Main Street and be someone like me that didn't necessarily know how to program or have the money to do it, what would people invent? What would people make? And, how could investigative journalism change? What kinds of projects could happen if people could actually define what things they're trying to find out? So
give us a concrete example of what's come out of this.
Sure. So a project that we're going to be working on in the next year is one where we try and map every single Superfund site in the country. So anyone who...
The toxic dumps.
Yes,
what's going on?
toxic dumps.
And things that have not happened.
Yeah.
Because they've been very slow in the cleanup.
They have, and so we're starting with the community Ashland, Massachusetts. It's about a half hour from here. They were one of the first 10, and it's a dye factory. And just in hanging out in that community, everybody seems to have a story about it, like walking through the area when they were kids and coming home and having like purple skin, purple sweat, or we'd love to make it so people could take pictures around the fence.
But ultimately,
share
you're trying to
stories.
get the Superfund to work. Is that is there a purpose being served here?
Yeah, we think that if everyone has the opportunity, first of all, this is a dye factory. So if you live near a dye factory and you could see, the 10 other Superfund sites around the country that are also dealing with the same kind of issues, the same kind of cancer, share stories, compare.
Can you hold the government more accountable?
Yeah, I think so.
Through this?
And the other part is that every site like this is required to put the binders of information about the cleanup in a public space. And so in Ashland, it's in a library, in a room, and it's kind of impenetrable data. And so trying to also think about this archive in a different way, to try and add more personal stories to that archive, to make it more discernible.
Do you have an example so far, pre-Ashland, of something where pulling together this interactive has actually brought social change or sparked social change?
I mean, with Mapping Main Street, the thing that happened that was totally unexpected for us was that educators started using it for their own purposes. That teachers decided that was a great way to teach kids about Creative Commons, and also to get kids into the community, interview people, help them to facilitate telling stories, take pictures. And so I think that's the biggest success, was that people could make what they wanted to out of it.
Are you committed over time now to the Berkman Center and to to Ziga?
Yeah.
I mean, do you see this as a 12-year project, or do you see it shorter term?
It's certainly, so we have a grant from the Night News Challenge this year. We won this
This
last
is the Knight
year.
Foundation in Miami?
Yeah, and so we have about 18 months to do
18
that.
months.
And we'll be working with about 10 different pilot projects. We're working with the Digital Public Library of America to try and connect repositories,
And if people want to oversee the Berkman Center, is it over near the law school? Where is it exactly?
it's right over by the law school. It's in a little yellow house that's
Yeah.
actually a little beyond the law school. If you pass Everett Street, it's a yellow house with a nice porch.
Is everybody over there as excited as you are?
I think so. I don't know. I'm really excited.
It's nice to see. Let's move on. We're going to open this up, and you all can jump in just 2 minutes. But let's go through it. Nicholas Negroponte has built an international reputation for his work, and his most recent effort with computers, trying to make sure that low-cost computers are made available to children around the world. But he was a co-founder of the Media Lab at MIT and ran that, and it's a very exciting place as well. So while you're here at Harvard, go to the Berkman Center and go to the MIT Media Lab. I have not been to the MIT Media Lab, but I have seen Nicholas in operation. He's very exciting.
Well, we'll have to fix that. You have to find out. The Media Lab, aside from everything else, it's the best piece of architecture in New England. It just opened about 1.5 years ago, and it's breathtaking. I'm just going to reach back 6 years when I started one laptop per child, and it was started for a very simple reason. And part of the reason is what I ask myself when I wake up every morning. And it's just one question, and that is, will normal market forces do what I'm doing today? And if the answer is yes, then stop. Because if normal market forces are going to do it, then I'll let them do it. But there's certain things that normal market forces don't do. And one of them was, when I started one laptop per child, was to look at the roughly 500 million children who either literally don't get any education, or what they get is so poor you would probably agree it isn't really much an education around the world in primary schools. Primary education means the most to me, at least, because if you screw that up, you don't have it. You can't go much further. And today there are officially 80 million children who don't go to first grade. And I mean, that's the official number, so it's probably higher than that. So when we look at that, and we look at countries, I'll pick Afghanistan, where literally 25% of the teachers are illiterate. The next 25% are only one grade ahead of the children. So if they're teaching third graders, they've been to fourth grade. 50% of the boys and 75% of the girls don't go to school. So when you look at a situation like that, you say, well, I can't just build schools and train teachers. I mean, yes, you should do that, but that's going to take an awfully long time. And even in cases not as extreme as Afghanistan, is there another way? And the answer is yes, there is another way. And the other way is to leverage the children themselves, to get them to be more active in their own learning at a very early stage. And one project we're doing right now is to prove very scientifically that children can actually learn how to read on their own. And if that's true, it's in the process, but that's the question. If it turns out to be true, that would be really transformational. But in between, what we did is we looked at the situation, which connectivity and in particular laptops 6 years ago, and it was clear that market forces would not make a $100 laptop. So we said we would. And we did. We announced it. It got a lot of publicity. We're a nonprofit, so we did it with the United Nations. Kofi Annan and I announced it in Tunis in 2005, and it was a cute little thing that cranked by hand because these kids don't have electricity. They connected to each other, so if one of them was connected to the internet, all the others were, and it was technically a wonderful, wonderful project. I had gone to 6 countries: Thailand, Pakistan, Nigeria, Libya, Argentina, and Brazil, and got the heads of state to agree to do every child in their country. Now, what does agree mean? Agree means that Gaddafi's hugging Nicholas and saying, I'll do every child. Musharraf, Thaksin Shinawatra, Obasanjo, Lula, and Kirchner all said the same, which was good because it got a lot of buzz, and the people in Taiwan, and roughly 3,000 engineers worked on the project. And it was realized, and then when it was popping out of the box, it was clear to me that those 6 countries wouldn't do it right away for a variety of reasons. And so three others stepped forward, Uruguay, Peru, and Rwanda, and did it. And Uruguay's, in fact, already done it. 18 months ago, they completed every child in the country, 5 to 15 years old, has a laptop, connected laptop, Wi-Fi at school, most of them have Wi-Fi at home. Peru has 1 million of them, and we can't get the exact number, but roughly half of those kids are teaching their parents how to read and write. I don't have a better story. I just don't. Because the self-esteem of those kids skyrockets, the social change in the village. They're all remote villagers. The President Garcia of Peru had the wherewithal. It was just incredible. He said, just do the remote villages, which is, again, very interesting because it doesn't have any political value to him because he can't show it to anybody. They don't necessarily vote or bring him into office. And he made a very bold decision. And today, and I'll stop here, there are, in rough numbers, 2.5 million of these in 40 countries, 25 languages. Rwanda and Peru are heading to total saturation. Thaksin Shinawatra's sister won in Thailand recently, and one of her platforms was 1 laptop per child, and so they're going to do that. And it's just growing. It's no longer do people say, is this the right thing to do? It is the right thing to do. It's just how do you pay for it? And it costs $1 a week per child to own it and to maintain it and to buy it and to do all of those things. So the running cost of the total cost of ownership isn't so high. The bad lesson I learned, this is, you said, talk about the things, and it really, I didn't anticipate this. I thought I had a Mother Teresa shield around me. I don't draw a salary. I'm doing it philanthropically. It's a charity. We've spent actually almost $1 billion. I mean, this isn't a small operation. This is a big operation. And I thought, that I would, people would, advance this and commercial interests, one after the other, thwarted this time and time again. And I never realized that the self-interest of corporations could be so negative as something that I thought was so charitable and so important. So that was the bad lesson. And you overcome it. Looking at that, we kind of won whatever that meant. But there are kids who don't have laptops today or tablets or connectivity who could have had. And that's, to me, criminal.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm really glad you brought that up because I had the impression there was a lot of pushback somewhere, and I couldn't remember quite where I'd read stories about this. This was running into obstacles that were unexpected, and so what are these? Are these the Apples and the Microsofts who see you taking over their potential market for selling into these countries?
It was Microsoft and Intel in particular. We don't use an Intel processor, and we didn't use Windows, and so. They don't want beachheads. You don't want an entire nation to be brought up without Windows. It's really simple. And I've known Bill his entire adult life, and we kind of vaguely speak these days. But it's just the undermining and the backhandedness that occurred was astonishing because we caught people on videotape saying things like, "This is definitely not going to work. We know it doesn't work." Of course it worked. It worked very well. So that part bothered me. But, in the end, you prevail, and as people start using it, since we're a nonprofit that doesn't take any margin. We're not just a nonprofit, but when laptops go out, we don't take a margin. Now that's very important, because that means if 1 million go out or 100,000, make any difference. So we were in the position that we could not care. And so in the end, if they get someone else's tablet or somebody else's computer, fantastic. That's not the issue.
In retrospect, are you glad that you were started as a nonprofit, or do you think you might have been better off starting as a for-profit?
Oh, I'm absolutely unequivocal about being a nonprofit for 3 reasons. One is not a single person will question my motive. Okay, I'm not trying to sell anything. So that's very important. You can have partners like the UN, and that's very important. And also, to be honest, you attract people like people in this room. You attract people who think of the moral purpose long before they do about sort of the business model. And I've watched the social entrepreneurship grow at Harvard Business School, in spite of the faculty. Faculty didn't really want this. There was a student-organized meeting, whatever it was, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And it was, the faculty said, oh, you can do it on Sunday, or whatever it was. So they did it on Saturday and Sunday, and then it grew, and it became. So, it's times are different. As recently as 10 years ago, all the Media Lab students, not all, but 90% of them, graduated and wanted to start companies, be entrepreneurs. Today, they all want to just change the world. I suspect that's true here at Harvard. They want to change the world. And they've learned, and most of their parents learned this too late. They learn it usually at about the age of 55, 60 maybe. And that is that in life, it's all about meaning, not money. So it doesn't matter how much money you make. It's you look back, and you can be a very successful banker, you can do all these things, or investment banker, whatever, and you wake up one morning and you say, oh my God, what was life about? And it's really quite fascinating because people learn that late, and then their kids start seeing it. And a lot of kids now that I see at MIT, Princeton, Harvard, get that early, and bless you, enjoy it. And you will find even people our age who've had enormously successful careers. And you meet them for the first time, and what do they talk about at a cocktail party? They talk about when they were in the what do you call it? The Corps, what am I blocking? The Peace Corps. They when I was in the Peace Corps. You've had a whole lifetime of experience. And what do you talk about? When I was in the Peace Corps. Doesn't that happen to you often? Mm-hmm. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. It's really amazing. So enjoy it. Do it. Go for it.
So if students here wanted to come over and go and just see what's going on at the Media Lab and better understand this, how would they do that?
Is this being recorded?
We can cut this out.
What? Cut this out? Okay, if you cut this part out. You walk into the building and you ignore every sign that says don't go beyond this point. Okay, and you literally walk in and be gregarious. Okay, being shy, just be gregarious. You say, I'm a Harvard student, and people, and particularly at nighttime. Go nighttime and weekends.
And what will you see?
Oh, you'll see all sorts of things it's very photo, it's very photogenic, and lots of two-story spaces that look more like ateliers. You'll see a lot of prosthetic devices, a lot of tangible computing, a lot of basically human interface work. There's, again, the visual things will be the ones that you can see, without asking too many questions, because people are pretty good at putting display cases, and then you'll see somebody printed recently a clock. This is computer output, and it comes out ticking. Now, come on, that's pretty good. Yeah, it comes out of the machine ticking.
Is that like the violin they have on the cover of The Economist, that one that was computer generated?
It probably, yeah.
It's computer generated.
Yeah.
The violin, and I think it's as good as a Stradivarius, I think. That was completely generated by computer and processed and manufactured right off the computer.
Yep.
Okay, so there are two good places at Harvard to visit.
Yeah.
And that is after you've seen women making movies in a movie you're about to see, right? Tell us about women making movies. And why should it be about women making movies? Because there are not enough women filmmakers? Tell us the difference. You're in interesting territory here.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's women make movies. Although we are active, it's not in our title or our name. Women Make Movies is actually almost 40-year-old social enterprise, but I didn't even realize that we were a social enterprise 40 years ago when we were founded. I didn't found the organization. I came to the organization about 10 years after it was founded, but it was founded with a very specific purpose, kind of the way that One Laptop, One Child was. And that was to put cameras into the hands of women who wanted to make films and didn't have the opportunity to get the training. In the 70s, there were very, very, very few women who actually had the skills to make films. 40 years later, there are many, 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 many women making films in this country, but unfortunately, the membership of the Directors Guild of America is still 10%. Our Congress is much more feminist than our film industry.
That's a heck of a lot.
Yeah. almost every industry in this country is more feminist than our film industry in terms of the opportunities that are being given to women. So, so Women Make Movies is a project that actually really should go out of business, but 40 years later is thriving, and there's it's a kind of terrible irony in that we're still thriving, because there still is such a need for women to have support to make the kinds of films that reflect their realities, that reflect their experiences, and that in some ways interject another narrative into the mainstream media. I believe deeply in the fact that art has the potential to change lives, and Women Make Movies has always been at the intersection of politics and art. We both believe in creative form as well as in political change, and the films that we distribute are films that really challenge people to think about the world in a very, very different way from the way they normally see it. Whether it's the difference between seeing women in Afghanistan on the nightly news, or it's seeing the lives of women in Africa differently than you might see it in a National Geographic magazine. We work with women filmmakers from all over the world, from every continent with the exception of Antarctica. We distribute more than 500 films to audiences from art house cinemas to consumer audiences through universities and colleges like here, as well as broadcasters like HBO and PBS. And we've actually been really, really successful with the works that we distribute. In the last 5 years, we've had films that have been nominated for Academy Awards, as well as films that have won at the Sundance Film Festival. So it's very much an ongoing project, and I'm very excited that we'll be able to show a clip of a film that we're working with. We actually aren't producing it. Joanna Lipper is producing it. She's here. She's a visiting lecturer here at Harvard. And she's part of another program, besides a distribution program, where we work with women filmmakers, helping them to actually raise money to get their films made. But I think the reason actually why I'm here on this panel at Harvard is that Women Make Movies is also a nonprofit like One Laptop, One Child, but we're a very different kind of nonprofit in that for the last 30 years we've actually run the organization almost primarily on earned income. So we see social entrepreneurship from another perspective, which is that of a nonprofit that was actually forced by government funding cuts to find our own way and to raise our own money, and we've managed to do that through our constituencies.
How do you earn the money?
By selling and renting films, by licensing them to broadcasters,
By selling
and renting films to universities, colleges, libraries, the military, the government, businesses, broadcasters, cinemas.
And are these mostly with independent? These mostly independent films.
All independent.
They're all
films.
independent.
They're all independent.
And what kind of budgets are they running on?
Oh, everything from I would say $10,000 to $1.5 million, but no more than that. Actually, your brother used to rent Office Space from us.
Oh.
Yeah. Nicholas's brother is one of those independent filmmakers.
It's the other brother.
Yeah. And so, Deborah, we know with in literature, women now. There's so, in terms of gender equality, there's so many women writers who have made it and made a real difference. In fact, many would argue that women are almost dominating fiction. Tell us so clearly women can make great films. Tell us is there a difference you notice in the what's coming out of the films? Is it the social message? Is it in understanding things in a different way? Is it a different voice? What is it that you see?
Well, I'll actually I'll tell one of our success stories as a way of talking about that. I'm sure that everybody in the room here has heard about the devastating rape of women that's going on in the Congo. Well, about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, most of you hadn't heard about that. It hadn't been in the news. It hadn't been on the front page of the New York Times. But one of the filmmakers that we were working with was actually on the ground in the Congo making a film about it. So about a month after the story hit the front page of the New York Times, we were able to release a film called The Greatest Silence: Rape in the Congo. She was aware of it because as a woman, she was hearing about what was going on in the Congo. She was somebody who had been gang raped in DC and went to the Congo to find out if the stories that she'd been hearing was true. What was really amazing about that film was that soon afterwards we were able to do a screening with the Open Society Institute in New York, and the wife of the ambassador to the UN came to the screening and took the film home. Was
The Congo?
no, the U.S. ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to the UN. I'm blanking out on his name right now. And she brought the film home and showed it to him, and he was able to introduce a resolution into the United Nations to actually give the peacekeepers a little bit more teeth in their ability to protect the women in the Congo. So I think it's a great story because I think that it's really about the power of the media to touch people in a certain way, and it's also the reason why I think it's so important that women have the ability to tell those stories.
I'm just curious. You and Kara obviously are doing very related work, and I'm just curious if there's an interplay. If you could do the kind of interactive work, or you all at the Berkman Center, if there are partnerships or synergies there that would be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I know about the Mainstream Project. It's great, and I'm a big fan. And yeah, definitely.
And yeah, we're definitely also, we'll be taking on pilot projects this year to try and figure out what we're even making. And so, yeah, as I'm hearing you talking, getting excited.
A lot of the filmmakers that we're working with now are really embarking on really, really interesting, innovative outreach projects using the internet and using all kinds of different kinds of technology to first of all, to help them get the word out about their films, because the internet has been this absolutely extraordinary intervention in all of our lives, but we're at a point where there are so many voices talking to us all the time, all day long, so many ways that we're getting information, that although it's easy to reach people, it's harder to reach them at the same time, because you really have to make an impression. You have to, I think, get in front of people 4 times before they even know
and so that's very, 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 I think it's very helpful. It's often said about selling a book. It's only after people have heard about the book the 3rd time
exactly
that they will buy it. But if they've heard about it 3 times, there's a high probability that some people will buy it. Okay,
Exactly.
so how do you break through this? How do you break through the noise?
by being really innovative and creative, and by using the internet and creating these kinds of things like this Mainstream Project is a really great way, because there's so many different ways that a project like that can get into people's lives, whether it's through the radio, whether it's through the internet, whether it's through a game. A lot of our filmmakers are working with game technologists to create games that take the issues in these very serious social issue type documentaries and make it accessible to younger people, and make it accessible to people that may not even know that that's an issue that they want to know about.
Okay. Well, Charles, you've been waiting patiently, and you really have turned to the internet to try to help spark social change. Tell us about the effort.
So I should just preface my story by saying that I also come from a media background. I used to work at CNN, and I started there with your son Chris, actually at Headline News. And so actually journalism and media is a very powerful gateway into social change, and I find that over and over again in the people that I meet in this space. And there are many reasons why, but I won't go into it now. Only to say that I didn't come to this field because I covered, social entrepreneurship at CNN. In fact, I had never even heard of the word until I left and produced a series for PBS called PBS Global Tribe. And that's when we traveled around the world and focused on individuals who are doing what they can to change their communities and their world for the better. And seeing them in action just made me realize that I can't keep on going as a witness or as an observer of this action. I need to somehow get involved in it as well, and especially encouraging other young people in North America to be more engaged in social change. So 5 years later, I'm working at Ashoka, which is the world's largest network of social entrepreneurs, and I ran a few global campaigns for them to support young people in starting social ventures. And so we supported their efforts in more than 20 countries, and launching more than 100 ventures. And one thing that kept nagging at me was the fact that these are the ones that made it through the process, and there were so many more who wanted to be part of social entrepreneurship who were not supported by us. And in fact, a lot of organizations in this space tend to issue a lot of calls to action, but they don't tend to support people through the process and help them understand how to create change. And so I decided to take some time off and develop and try to think about how can I help spread the best practices, the knowledge of the social sector to all these, quote, amateurs who are eager to learn. And I think my journalism background helped me think about creative ways to package information in a way that can be more engaging. So instead of just emailing them, PDFs and reports of white papers from foundations, I try to create these multimedia presentations that I put up on SlideShare, and they've been viewed and downloaded 68,000 times. And if you go to the World Bank's 68,000 times. And if you go to the World Bank's Development Marketplace website, those are the toolkits now that are being offered to the social entrepreneurs that they engage with. But now I'm, I'm collaborating with the Knight Foundation as well in thinking about how to further invest in people and their development as change agents, and not always just focus on investing in the products that come out of social entrepreneurship, in the solutions, but in also developing individuals to become change agents. So we're talking about scaling up my website's Social Creatives, where these tools can be found, into the equivalent of the Khan Academy, for social change skills. So really focusing on process, not just products, and helping people understand the skills that are needed in creating change.
So if one goes into your website and clicks in, is it a film that you would see about some aspect of social entrepreneurship, fundraising, using the internet or developing social media? What is it you get?
These visual presentations that, sort of like Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth presentation, but much more condensed, much more concise, and it's a way for me to try to spread knowledge in a concise and engaging way that can incorporate multimedia, and people can learn about various skills and various concepts in a simple way.
So with the Shoka, you were working with Bill Drayton.
Right.
You got to Bill Drayton to come on and talk about this, and in instructive ways, or individuals, or are you doing this through animation? What are you doing?
Yeah, this is totally separate, and it's through these multimedia decks, and that's how I'm thinking of trying to capture knowledge and creating a new form of knowledge transfer in the sector that's different from books. And people are not going to learn about social innovation through classrooms necessarily. Most people will not have that opportunity. So how can we spread the knowledge and help each other learn more quickly? For me, it's the multimedia, SlideShare, that kind of platform is more user-friendly.
I should tell all of you that there is a lot of talk now about trying to create some kind of incubator here on campus somewhere, and we've been trying to raise money at the Kennedy School. The business school has just opened up over in the old public television, WGBH's building, a center for innovation, but it's mostly so far going to be about for-profit startups, but they're reserving some space in there for social change agents, for nonprofits. And we haven't worked out yet how this is all going to occur, but it has a real possibility, because this whole idea of an incubator takes you beyond the classroom, allows you to try to raise some money, get a business plan, it helps you get started. There's some mentors and things like that. Right. They can introduce you to people, can introduce you to angels and that sort of thing.
Right. So what I'm most interested in is not just incubating solutions, but incubating people. And because the young people that I work with are not ready to take their product to hundreds of thousands like Professor Negroponte can. They are young people, 16-year-old students in Argentina who are not necessarily book smart in any sense of the word, but they're passionate about doing their part. And one kid I work with is building tricycles for the disabled. And there's no market, no company is going to do this, because all these machines have to be customized to each person's unique disabilities and needs. And he builds the most amazing tricycles on his own, and just think about the process that's involved in understanding what a disabled child needs, and how to build something, that they can use and that they love to use, and just the empathy that's involved, the human relationship that's involved, and this is where you were asking about, some of the mistakes. I find that often that the gaps in knowledge in this field is more about people. At CNN, it was drilled into my head that stories are about people, and I think in social entrepreneurship, we also have to understand that change is about people. It's about understanding who we are and how we engage in change, because it's a long, drawn-out process. You have to be aware of your own needs and what motivates you, but you also have to understand the people that you're trying to benefit and how they behave. So another way that I'm using media technology is using game thinking and game mechanics to help people design solutions that can be more fun and engaging. And I do it not because I'm trying to promote games as solutions to anything, but it's a interesting framework and context to think about human behavior and human psychology, and how do people engage in something meaningful.
It's so interesting, this conversation about technology, that it keeps circling back to people and the human behavior and where they fit in to the conversation, which is actually, I think, encouraging. That you all, you understand the technology, but you understand the technology as a means toward. Why don't we open this up? And because I know this is a very bright crowd. So are there questions, thoughts you all want to throw at individual panel members or the panel as a group? And it's a big enough group, we can, it's hard to ask the first question, so we'll go directly to the second question, if you'd like. Who please?
This is a question for Professor Negroponte. In countries like Nigeria, where inconsistent electrical power is one of the huge issues that the population faces, obviously your solution was really innovative. How much time do you get by cranking those laptops, and how practical is it to find alternatives in countries where they're just not addressing the power disparities rapidly enough for education and for children?
Well, let me generalize the answer and also apologize that I actually have to leave after I make this answer to catch a flight, and I really apologize for doing that. But power is one of the most important problems, not because you have to make it yourself, which is certainly true, but in most of these countries, children don't have power at school, and most of them don't have power at home. You've got to make power in a way that it is going to be makeable at night, without the sun, in the rainy season. I can go down a list, and you can't use fuel. So the only way to make power that way is you yourself with your body. You have to crank, you got to pedal, you got to do something, because that is predictable, and that's food calories, but it can convert. And a malnourished child, not extremely, but not very well nourished, can generate about 10 watts with their upper body, moving things, and at least 5-10 times that with their legs, pedaling and so on. So if you want to get a ratio of 10 to 1, you want to be able to crank for 1 minute to get 10 minutes, you then are in a regime which is like cell phones. It's not like laptops. So one of the things we did, and we worked very hard at it, was to be low power, and we're going to come in under a watt now. And your laptop uses 40 watts. So there's a 40 to 1 difference between what we're aspiring to do and what your laptop currently does, which is a big deal. Not because of greenness, not because of the cost of fuel, but because you've got to do it with your upper body.
If batteries become much more efficient, would that also help to?
It helps. What it does is what a battery does is buffer things, and so it allows you to do some time shifting. But it's really just time shifting. And batteries are important, and it's time if you have a plug that you can plug to, that's great. And battery technology is getting steadily better, but not the way computers are getting better. It's not a logarithmic or exponential
But can you bring the cost down over time even more?
You can bring the cost down to things like laptops and tablets enormously. You can bring tablets down to, $25, $30. Maybe that's going to take a few years. We have one right now that will come in under $100, and it's both a Kindle and an iPad. It's both. It's a little switch. You want it to work in the sun? One switch. You want it to work at night and transmit light? Another. This performance is better than the iPad in iPad mode and better than the Kindle in Kindle mode, and it's under $100. So you can, and people will, and people don't like it when we do it, but you can. And I really apologize.
Nicholas, look, this program was scheduled from 5 to 6. It's 6, and we're deeply appreciative that you were here. We're grateful to you. Thank you very much. I was quite impressed that you guys got Nicholas here. So I know how busy you're in demand all of them. Good to see you.
We have time for more questions.
Sure. Yeah. Please, others. Who would like to jump? Who wants to jump in? Come on, guys. Please.
I have a question for Charles, just following up on your comments. This process of kind of helping develop the next generation of change makers, to use some Ashoka's language. I regret that I'm not very familiar with the platform that you described on the Social Creatives website. But because it's such a personal process, figuring out what motivates, what my story is and how my values, overlap with your values and how we mobilize people around a shared purpose. How can you address the obstacle of using this technological platform for engaging people in a very personal process of communicating about values and stories?
Right. So it always has to be a combination of online engagement and offline action. It cannot just be a virtual experience. And so the more that you can help people understand what types of offline experiences they should create for themselves, the better. And I think we do a poor job in this sector of jumping very quickly to the issues that we need to solve and the outcome metrics that we need to hit. And for people who enter this field of change, sometimes what they really need to find out in the beginning is what do they have to offer. Because not everyone sees themselves as having system-changing solutions. They're just starting the process of thinking about social change. And so helping them understand their skills and their gifts and their capabilities and how to engage that in change is the most important part of that initial process. And letting people take the time, to figure out what they're connected to. So some of the students I work with at Claremont McKenna, they study about global poverty in the classrooms, but they realized that there was maybe a gap between what they know and what's real out there. And so what they decided to do was not immediately to say, oh, I'm going to develop a solution that can address global poverty. What they decided to do was to go down to Guatemala and spend 2 months living there on $1 a day and filming the experience and using that time, trying to survive, but also interviewing the villagers, their neighbors, and trying to understand their financial realities. And they created these YouTube videos, which have been, when they put it up, were seen by more than 400,000 people. And so that experience was really a process of achieving empathy, of trying to stand in other people's shoes. And what they learned, which are really valuable lessons for any social entrepreneur, is that empathy requires a process, and empathy is challenging. And there can be disagreements, different perspectives, even within your own team, about what is it that people really need, or what is it that they really go through. So it is a process, and we shouldn't underestimate how difficult it is to understand the needs of others and how to serve those needs well. So they didn't come away from Guatemala with a solution. They came away with an understanding that they're, with a film that their peers can engage with. More than 400,000 people watched it. And they also came away with a commitment to that issue that no classroom can really give them, because it comes out of their personal experience.
Please.
So I guess related to your answer, first of all,
Here's a microphone.
oh, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your comments. I really have liked this panel. So I guess when I think about media and social media, technology, documentaries, I consider it as a forum for raising awareness on different issues. But I guess my question to you is, how do you think that these technologies can be applied in transferring this awareness to action? And how we can actually leverage the media, social media, for social change.
Leveraging social media for social change. How to do technology? How these technologies?
Because I think a lot of, at least from what I understand, a lot of this technology can be used to raise awareness. And so I guess my question is, from the connection of awareness to action, where do you think media plays a role?
That's a particularly good question for the two of you.
I mean, one thing that there's so many amazing projects out there that are trying to help people, to give voice to communities. I mean, I'm thinking of Sasha Costanza Chalk that's over at MIT at the Center for Civic Media, and his project VozMob, which allows day laborers to have a forum to post their daily lives, to talk about what's happening, to create more safety at the work site, and so what we're thinking about, at least with Ziga, is this really human-centered kind of model of design. Thinking about if we're making something for if I'm designing something like VozMob for day laborers, that actually, I mean, it's an incredible project, but there's a moment of tension where I'm not a day laborer and I've created this project. And so, one thing is trying to make something so that someone can define their own project, the questions that they're trying to ask. So making something where people can even figure out what they're gathering. And then, so we're just, I mean, the dream would be that we could make something where people could have an idea for social action and they could create a project that would be able to potentially make the change that they want to make. We're not going to actually build that framework for that, but we'll provide the means for people to create those themselves.
I think first of all we have to understand that I don't know, I think the woman that spoke before and how you were speaking, that this really is about people, and that social change happens in people's heads. It happens in their the old expression, hearts and minds, and that media is really best used in terms of asking people, challenging them to really think about things in a different way. I think that so many filmmakers in the last 5 years have really become engaged in these projects that really are about both awareness and partnering with organizations that are working on the ground and actually doing, extending the message of the film. But I think that as media makers, it's also really important that that it not be expected of the person that's making the media to actually do the work beyond that. Because right now what's happening, and this may be very particular, but what's happening in the funding universe for documentaries is that documentarians, filmmakers, are being asked to do so much more than just make a film in terms of social change. And I really respect them as artists. They are message crafters and not necessarily the best people to be working on the ground. On the other hand, partnerships are amazing. Right now, two of the filmmakers that we're working with, we were able to license their film on domestic violence and on changes in domestic violence laws in California to ID, investigative discovery. And I was really amazed that this very mainstream channel is putting all of this effort into an awareness campaign around issues of domestic violence. Is that change? It's not changing the lives of the women who are getting beat up today, but maybe it will in time from now.
What I think experience would also bear out the idea that often it's one organization that may create the film. It's a different organization that then has to carry the ball. Take the activities of Jeff Skull, for example, who is funded now Participant Films, and has made made the Al Gore film, and he made a zero nuclear war, a zero nuclear weapons world. Now, Jeff financed that. He got a producer to go out. A fellow named Lawrence Bender, who's been here at Harvard, to talk to us about making that film. We showed it here at Harvard, but there's a whole different group that is now started up and is actually pushing how do we get from here to a nuclear-free world. And the filmmakers feel they can't do that. They go on and make the next film, but then there are others who pick it up and use the film. Social entrepreneurship has taught the subject, and both on the West Coast and here at Harvard. As you listen to this, I'm just curious about your reaction to what you've been hearing this evening. And maybe there's a microphone.
So thanks, David. Well, that's different than a question to the panel, but my main reaction is joy at the incredible energy and yet again the important participation of the students at Harvard in making this happen. And I'm just wondering when the faculty are going to catch up. So
what's that?
I'm just wondering when the faculty are going to catch up. So we need that kick in the pants, and maybe I'll put out a question. So if you were to look at we've talked a lot about people, and we know and we acknowledge that people are really at the center of the social change. But let's imagine for a moment, even without Negroponte in the room, what the most important changes in the technology are that we could then seize upon in order to leverage this impact on people.
I mean, this isn't a specific technology, but more of a concept. But I think what a lot of this brings up is that we're talking about trying to create some kind of participatory public sphere. We're talking about the future of public knowledge, and that right now with collecting stories, with creating forums for people to be able to share information and incorporating that with archives and then putting that someplace together. We're dealing with a lot of people's thoughts and intellectual property and ideas, and just one of the reasons why we decided to be a nonprofit, I think, is just like, who owns that? Who should have control of that, and who determines whether that will survive 100 years? Or, I think of Yochai Benkler, who's at the Berkman Center, and he talks about how Napster is kind of the greatest archive of music that was ever created, and just this idea of social anarchy and like everybody sharing and that trying to, keep all of this information safe. And so I think, I don't have an answer to this, but I think it's a really interesting question right now, because we're talking about right at this moment we're going to have collaboration between libraries and museums and NPR and the New York Times and citizens, and so if all of that information is somehow brought together and you can access it together to make all these amazing projects, then where does that live and how do we deal with that? So I think technology in that direction is something really interesting to think about.
Well, I think technology is becoming increasingly personalized, especially with the advent of mobile. Our experience with technology is very much our own and very much unique, and we never leave technology anymore. I mean, we're like these cyborgs that will always be part technology, part human. And I think there's a book that I would recommend everyone checking out, which is called Program or Be Programmed. And I think in this day and age,
what's the title?
Program or Be Programmed. So the message is that in this day and age, I mean we can be very oblivious to how much we've been programmed by other people, and a core skill of today's generation, youth growing up, is that you have to be aware of your media diet and what's with your information diet, and you have to take an active role in programming your own life. And I think helping people build that capacity will help them shape their own path better and help them use technology to shape their own path. So, I use my phone to notify me of things I want to do that are positive. And I use those to-do lists to schedule repeat tasks. And so I'm programming myself, and I'd rather. And that sounds a bit, kind of weird, but it's like that's better than being programmed by others. And like so, because I do the social innovation competition around gaming. I've immersed myself in games quite a bit, in video games, and playing Cityville, the most popular game. And I just notice how much it's programming me and how much it's making me come back to the platform every few hours just to update my city. And it's crazy that it can have that kind of power, but I think we need to learn from that just how human psychology works and how we can increase that knowledge in people so that they are not victims of other people's programming, but are masters of their own lives.
Oh, I don't know that I have all that much to add. I actually do think that it is about community, and I think that wherever technology, wherever that overlay is, wherever that point of connection is, that's where it's the most critical, and that's where the exciting things happen. And that sounds a little bit obscure, but from my perspective, coming from a time when video was actually a new concept. When I went to college, my parents said, "What's video?" And I said I was studying video. And the only way to get films to people was to actually have projectors, light-based projectors in a dark room. It's come so incredibly far. And what is the technology today is not going to be the technology 10 years from now. So it's really understanding that whatever it is that you're working with, the technology is just the means. It's never the although Marshall McLuhan said media is the message, it's never more important than what is actually being communicated. People are constant, I've been telling me for 30 years now that we're going to be delivering video through digital means. And this has been going on for 15 years. I've been told we're not going to have to put DVDs in, we're going to have to put VHS tapes in bubble bags, we're going to have to put 3/4-inch tapes in bubble bags, we're not going to have to put DVDs in bubble bags. And yes, right now for consumers, most people are getting their media streamed. We're still sending DVDs out in bubble bags to universities and colleges, and it will take another 5 years before that changes. So to me, it's just the technology is just it's just that tool. So it's going to be different today than it is 5 years from now.
Yeah, David, if I could just say, so in listening to the responses, I am struck by the power of the distributed media with the internet, and that I would say is an extraordinary new change. And I think that the Arab Spring is probably the best example of that I've seen. So as your content goes out, and you're getting it on YouTube instead of getting it by going to a movie theater, this is really an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, there's an interesting argument that we really haven't dealt with here about the power of social media for change, and that it was Clay Shirky representing one perspective on that, who's argued very strongly that we're in a revolutionary time where social media is a main means for social change, using the Arab Spring as a prime example, but a broader argument, which has been challenged by Malcolm Gladwell, as you know. And Gladwell has made the argument you can bring modest social change. You can make people, just as people find through the media that you make light connections, not deep connections, through the relationship you build up on the internet, that you can get people to do fairly easy things for social change through the internet. But Gladwell argues you can't get them to do hard things. That you could never have gotten a civil rights movement. It would not have succeeded had it not been for really hard work and big social commitment and major devotion, and that's hard to stir up on the internet. It's an interesting, and Shirky disagrees. It's an interesting argument, and for those of you who are interested in this, the Bertelsmann Center has been a real magnet for people who want to understand these arguments better. I would urge you to go spend some time. I did want to add, and maybe we'll then have one last question, maybe from one of the organizers. This question of those of you who are starting social enterprises or have social enterprises, how you can use social media, how you can use the internet for leverage, how you can strengthen your own organization is an interesting question. And what's been, we had a visit here a few months ago at Harvard by Jean Case, the wife of Steve Case, who started AOL. And the Case Foundation is now offering to social entrepreneurs training, workshops to help them learn to better understand the internet, power of social media, and how they can use it for fundraising, for organizing, for doing a lot of other things. And if you all are interested, we've talked over at the Kennedy School at our Center for Public Leadership. Maybe we ought to bring the Case Foundation up here. Maybe we ought to do a couple of days of workshops, and maybe we ought to have a partnership with the undergraduates to figure out how to do that. Would that be something undergraduates will also be interested in? We can talk more about that. But there are a number of people around that I think if you're in this space of social change, that you ought to see this as the beginnings of a conversation, not the ends of a conversation. There is a continuing set of conversations to have, and you all deserve an awful lot of credit for bringing this together. So does one of you have one last question? Otherwise, we're going to close out. There's the mic.
I guess one question would be that a lot of people here are social entrepreneurs, but there's also a lot of people in the audience who aren't social entrepreneurs and maybe are looking for that one thing that really ignites them and makes them want to create change. And how could you utilize media and technology to sort of explore your own interests and find how you might be able to leverage those interests to impact change beyond your community and the world in general?
And I'll just add to that, I mean, what kind of parting words or inspiration would you give this audience in terms of, how can we use in our everyday lives? We're on our phones and our computers practically the entire day. How can we use that in a positive way, and how can we use that to create more social connectedness and this change in people's lives that we speak about?
Thank you. A wonderful way to close out. Each of you has the last few words.
Yeah. Do one of you all want to start this one?
Sure, go
I'm in the middle. Thank you.
So, I would say that I don't think social entrepreneurship or international development is the only or even the best gateway into social change. I think social change, what's beautiful about it is that it overlaps every field. And you can create change through any field that you're in. And for me, storytelling, journalism is a great entry point because today's social entrepreneurs need to know how to engage people in the stories that they're part of. And the young people from Claremont McKenna who, I took them to Argentina to speak at the TEDx Buenos Aires event down there, and they were hounded by the press. I mean, they were just on TV, several channels, interviewed by the main newspaper, and they were the only speakers who got that attention. And I wrote about it on the Huffington Post about why, their story captured people's imagination. It's because I equated it to, in film, you have high concept. They came up with a high concept project. And I think for us to engage the public in stories and not just put out more content, but actually engage the masses in the stories we care about, sometimes we have to go that extra mile of coming up with something that's high concept, and thinking of people who don't care about your issue and how could you engage them. So I mean, just finally, so I think storytelling is an essential skill for social change, social entrepreneurs, and I would even encourage you to begin there, and not necessarily designing solutions. So parting words would be that it's not enough to be driven. This path requires being called, feeling like you're being called to it, and that's how you can sustain yourself through a lot of the obstacles and trials and tribulations. But when you feel called, I mean, that's a beautiful thing, and that will always stay with you and give your project and your path meaning that other fields can't give you. So I hope that you will find that calling and all of us in this field are very much believers in the fact that we all need to help each other. And so feel free to reach out to me individually and just ask for my help, and I'll do my best.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, I'll just say that I heard what Professor Negroponte said before about people kind of getting to 55 and realizing that their lives don't have meaning. And I was thinking that I'm extraordinarily lucky because I started out my life knowing that I had to do something with my life that would create change. I just, for whatever reason, I always knew that. And I was lucky enough to also stumble into film as a way of creating that change. And there is an amazing synthesis between media and social change. And I was very lucky to be part of that. But I think that, again, I know it might not be the most popular thing to say here, that media is just a tool. And people get really excited by the latest toys and the latest glitzy technology. And I have never, ever gone that path because I really feel like it is storytelling that's behind that that's more important than the glitziness of the way that the stories get created. I have run a nonprofit organization for 30 years now. I have many colleagues who have invested a lot of money into the latest technology and have lived to regret it because the technology changes. So that's my message actually, is, embrace everything, but don't get blinded by the latest thing on the block, because oftentimes it's going to change. And the most important thing really is your sense of purpose and the relationships that you make and the partnerships, rather than relationships, the partnerships that you make with like individuals and other organizations that are going to make the difference in the project that you're trying to do.
Okay. Yeah, and I would just say a few things. First of all, when dreaming up what you want to make, I would say don't think about what exists and then, I would just say in dreaming up what you want to make, don't think about what exists and what can I make using that, but what do I want to make and then I'm going to make it. Don't let what exists hold you back. A thing that I've learned just in the last couple of years, to make any of these projects now requires a really intense degree of collaboration, and that I would say there's a level of not being so proprietary over your ideas. I think that ideas, so many people would have all the ideas that I've said tonight. It's just actually doing them, and collaborating with other people to do them, because there's no way I could have done any of them by myself.
Thank you for the last question. That really spurred the best answers. One wonderful way to close off. You all are going to move on to a film clip, so please don't go very far. But we should close off by thanking Kara and Deborah and Charles for the wonderful presentation and coming here tonight. Thank you.